So I've moved away from military suicide, although if my publisher for my second book is watching this, I am still writing that book. I will finish it. I am really sorry.
Right, well, deliberately divert your publicist to this episode so they can see this bit, and there you go, you've got your locked-in excuse ready.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't excuse the rest of the book that I haven't written.
So did you have a place where you guys just go to just stand?
Goth Green. It was literally called Goth Green. It was Eldon Square in Newcastle. I was a cyber goth.
So you went into the Matrix?
Yeah, exactly. But did you ever in Lara Croft in Tomb Raider 3 attempt to type out "wannabe" by the Spice Girls to see if her clothes would come off?
I never knew that was a thing, but I know plenty of gamers, and I will ask them that question. Si, great to see you, buddy. How you getting on?
Good morning, my dear friend. Delighted to be with you.
Yes, I'm glad to have you on. You're the only person that's actually requested to come on the show on a consistent basis since it stopped.
Yeah, I don't know whether that indicates my desperation for attention or just the level of enthusiasm I have for what you're doing. I would say it's 50-50.
I will go 50-50 because because the thing that always knackers me is that you do the product, you do well with it, you put it out there, and then when it says 10 views, and you look at your subscriber count and go, how is that possible? That just causes severe mental drain and mental fatigue. As I'm sure any creative understands.
I was going to say, I've got 3 different YouTube channels, and I would say that on a good day, my best ever YouTube channel, which was a channel called Feeding Under Fire, which was where back when I was a PhD student and then an early graduate, I was cooking First World War food and giving a historical background and feeding it to people, and it was all very kind of academic engaged, and it was a bit of fun, but it was also really kind of it was being used in schools in Canada, and that was really fantastic. But then you go to my view account and it was 30 people had watched the newest episode. I think the most views I ever got was 200. So I think YouTube is one of those things where there are different ways to consume your product, and YouTube doesn't collect them all, which is the way I allow myself to sleep at night.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of reasons that people allow themselves to sleep at night when it comes to that stuff. But you've obviously touched on some of your past, and that actually leads me into my first question, because one thing we all have in common is that we all have an origin story. So Si, for my followers, the ones that will tune in, please tell us your origin story.
Wow. All right.
Start with the obvious question. It leads from there. Where were you born?
All right. Okay. I was born. I don't admit this. I was born in a place called Doncaster in Yorkshire.
Ooh.
But I don't admit to it because
How come?
I grew up.
It's you're the only person that I've interviewed that has said I don't want to admit where I was born. The only people that say that round here is because the hospital they were born in got demolished and it's now flats.
I honestly, I don't know if you've ever been to Yorkshire. I wouldn't recommend it without a tetanus shot. But I was born in Yorkshire. I didn't have a great time in Yorkshire. I think that's the problem. So when I was born, my birth mother, who is a complicated character in this story, decided that she was going to have a go at being a lesbian. And so she entered into a relationship with a woman who became my mom, and her name was Dulcie. And they were very out, right? Now I'm very out, but they were proper statement on the world. We're talking wearing kaftans and nothing else in the supermarket level. Look at us. We don't care what society thinks. And as an adult, I am, I get that. I get the need for that. But this was the 1980s. I was born in 85. This was the 80s. We moved from Doncaster to a place called Mexborough, which is a tiny little ex-mining town on the outskirts of Doncaster in South Yorkshire. And it was horrific because I had these lesbian parents out to prove a point, and we lived in self-imposed poverty a lot of the time, because the other side of the story is that my granddad, my birth mother's father, was the bloody MP of Doncaster, right?
Wow.
But because they fell out, she refused to have anything to do with him. And so we lived in ridiculous poverty in this back end of nowhere. It was so homophobic, with the exception of a couple of people. I really struggled to make friends. I was bullied the minute I got into school. They used to call me the little gay boy.
Mm.
I mean, again, maybe it was a little bit prophetic, but they, there was silly things that I think back now and I think, oh my god, I can't believe that was accepted. But I wasn't allowed to get changed with the other kids in primary school because of all the complaints that were made about my gay parents and stuff like that. Now I can't have been the only one, but I was definitely the only one who's everybody knew. And this is right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, and I teach about the AIDS epidemic, and I remember there were a couple of uncles that came into the house who were very sick, and they got sicker and sicker and sicker, and eventually they went to hospital and they never came back. As an adult, I know that they had AIDS and they died, and I'm really proud of my mum taking care, and even my birth mother, taking care of these guys who were probably so alone, and they were part of that LGBT community. So I've got this kind of conflicted notion of I'm really proud of all of that and being there right at that beginning. But as a kid, it sucked. I got beaten up all the time. I barely went to school because I was terrified. And then when I hit 10 or 11, my birth mother decided she'd had enough of this all lesbian stuff, and she took off and left me and my mom just gone. And so she disappeared. And my father was never in the picture. So my mom had a mental breakdown. We moved within Yorkshire, but I still wasn't going to school. I'd been out of school for that point for nearly a year and a half. So we ended up moving to the northeast of England because my sister thankfully took us in. And because I was doing the cooking, I was 11 years old. I'm doing the cooking. So we got taken up to Sunderland. And that's really where I tend to start my kind of story is in Sunderland, just because I did have some good friends, and I've still got lifelong friends from there who I think are amazing because they embraced me for me rather than all the other things that people were saying. But it just wasn't great, and so I never really talk about it. Sorry, that's probably a stronger opener than you were hoping for.
Believe me, like, I can class it as not the worst.
Oh, lovely! I'll take that.
There's plenty of stories not dissimilar to yours, but what don't get talked about. I just find it so ironic that you were in a place of like such discrimination, such poverty, such exclusion, yet you moved to Scotland.
Well, yeah, yeah, not for a while. I went to the northeast, which is, you could almost interchange with that comment as well, because I went to the northeast. The northeast not overly known for its inclusive community, except I have to say that when I was a teenager in the northeast, sexuality wasn't one of the things that I had to worry about. Like there was a brilliant goth community that I fell into, and it's probably the most loved I ever felt in my teenage years.
Yeah, because you're only 2 years older than me. I was born in '87. So you would have been kind of like that what early 2000s goth new metal scene as well.
Yeah,
So I've got to ask, like up here we had a place that was called Borders. It was a bookshop, and it was it was not far away from Cat House, and we would all just converge there, and we would do fuck all. We would just stand and talk. Some people would be on their skateboards. Other people would be getting hit with kendo sticks across the back because it was also wrestling time. The fun stuff. And we'd always get moved just for standing around. So did you have a place where you used to guys just go to just stand?
Goth Green. It was literally called Goth Green. It was Eldon Square in Newcastle, just off the side of Eldon Square. And it was like this patch of grass. And there was an alternative clothes store where we all bought our clothes. When I was 17, I was a cyber goth.
So you went into the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. So I had like wires and spongy buttons and all that shit, and I wore a straight jacket as a jacket. I had hair down to my shoulders that changed color every couple of weeks. Like it was really fun.
So take note, the youth right now, you're copying all of us fuckers.
Yeah, but the problem is with being a historian is I can tell you that we were copying all the fuckers from the 70s.
Yes, we were. We were.
But
it also backs my theory as well. Every 30 years, every 3 decades, we go retro. Right, so right now in the 2020s, we're going retro for the 90s. So the 2030s is going to be the 2000s. So I cannot wait when my then teenage kids will be in those big fuck off Mosher jeans, Limp Bizkit hoodies, and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and talking to me about like, oh, I'm so into this retro band called Linkin Park, and I'll be like, sit down, you wee bastards, let's get into this.
We have a record collection to talk you through. And first of all, you're going to recognize that Hybrid Theory is
Yes,
one of the greatest albums that was ever made.
truth.
And then from then, you can shoot off in your own directions. If you want to sit down and listen to Rammstein, then we're right behind that. If you want to go Cradle, you want to go Slipknot, we can accept that. I don't mind even if you got Alien Ant Farm and Sum 41. We can accept that, but you will start with Linkin Park, and you will appreciate the genius.
Yes, definitely. And that would lead into like more kind of talks because, well, ironically, like something I've also been telling people about like when we've been around previously is like how you're a suicidologist, and the first question, my apologies, people ask is what is a suicidologist?
It's not a real job. I made it up. I'm actually a binman.
I'm a
Actually, I'm not
content creator. I still up you.
I'm not qualified enough to be a binman. That sounds like a classist joke to all bin people out there.
Yeah.
You're doing a cracking job.
To my
So
mate John Steele, aka Steely, who's been on several times and works for Biffa, well, thank you for emptying bins.
thank you for your service.
So
Yeah.
there we go. We've covered the
Um,
bin community by stereotyping my 5 foot friend.
I'm just not worried about that classist bastard. Me, not your friend. Although I do like the idea of a like elite upper class binman. But like, oh no, no, no. Anyway, let me move on. Like, oh, Waitrose, lovely. The attention span of a corgi on cocaine. That's my primary problem. What is a suicidologist? A suicidologist is suicidologist isn't a protected term, right? So anyone can call themselves a suicidologist. So I've already like demeaned myself in your eyes. I use it because my academic specialism is suicide. I am a specialist in suicide research, prevention, and recognition, particularly within occupational health, i.e., within the workplace, but much more generally. And again, it's a complicated element of how I got to that point. But in short, when I did my PhD, and I was an adult returner to education. And so when I did my PhD, I started in medical military history, focused on physical bodies, transformations, control, and agency in the First World War. It was very Foucauldian. It was very much about power and who's got the control over this, and Goffman's labels and Foucault's notions of power and all that kind of shite. And it was wonderful, and I enjoyed it. But I just turned 30, and my entire world collapsed. So to take you from the age of like 13 to 30, not to be all Jesus about this, but to take you from 13 to 30, in the space of that time, from being 13, I did move in with my sister. I ended up being homeless a couple of years later. I got kicked out from my sister's house. It was a really troubled time for her. It was a troubled time for me. I got kicked out. I lived with a friend. They kicked me out about a year and a half later. I ended up on the streets for a bit, living in hostels, slept out rough for a bit. I got out of school with barely anything, no qualifications, maybe a GCSE or two, but like bugger all. I didn't go to most of my exams. I was on drugs. I was drinking a lot. I was sleeping around a lot. I was just a mess. And I made an attempt on my own life when I was around about 17. When I was 17, I reached out to my birth father, and he refused to have anything to do with me. But I found out I had a half brother and sister. My birth mother would pop in, cause chaos, and then disappear again. My mom was quite ill and also very depressed. So it was just a really rough time. And so at the age of 18, I had very little, and then my grandfather died, who was the only kind of consistent relative that I had, and I just went off the rails. So if it wasn't for like Goth Green and the rest of it, I don't think I would have survived. But I realized I had to leave the country, so I left the country. I went abroad and I changed my entire everything. I went from, they called me BJ because I was a holiday rep. So I went out and everyone called me BJ. Which is not a great nickname for a holiday rep, gotta be honest. But the reason they call me BJ is because I arrived with tons of piercings, a massive beard, really long hair, and my new boss looked at me and went, "Fuck no." there is no way you can be holiday rep looking like that. And she went, go. And so everyone had met me the night before. So I went to the barbers. They cut everything off. I took the majority of my piercings out. The only thing I had left was the gothic tattoos, but no one cared about that. And so I came in, and I'd gone from looking about 45 to looking about 14. So everyone called me Baby Jesus. So it became my nickname. Everyone called me BJ. So I spent 2 years as BJ, as a holiday rep, and I had a lot of adventures, and many of which I'm not going to recount. But I had a great time, and then I came back in my early 20s because I met someone who I eventually went on to marry, and that's how I ended up in Scotland. So that's how I ended up here. Worked in recruitment, and then in recruitment, I'm good at sales. I can talk bullshit. We're comedians as well. We know we can bullshit anything. We can talk nonsense. So I was really good at that. But the banking crisis saw the end of that, 2007. So I was in banking recruitment, and suddenly there were no jobs. So I decided I'd become a teacher because the only thing I enjoyed at school was history. So I decided to become a teacher, no qualifications. So I got my first qualification from Kilmarnock College in 2008, and they gave me, and I did a HNC, first thing I ever earned. From then, I then went and did a degree in history with sociology at Strathclyde. I got a first class honours degree, highest mark in the year, and won several prizes. Then I won a funded master's in health history, and then I won a funded PhD. And within 10 years, I'd gone from no qualifications to doing a doctorate, which is amazing. In that time, my 2 sons were born, but the relationship that I had was just broken from the outset. I was too young to get married. I was too immature when we started. The relationship wasn't good. We just didn't like each other. And I had to change everything about me to stay in that relationship. And it came to a head just after I turned 30. That relationship collapsed, and everything I'd built collapsed with it. And I ended up living, I lost my house, my car, all of my friends, my sons, most importantly, my sons. I didn't see them for 6 months because the relationship was over, and she just kept them away from me. And so I ended up in December 2015, having just seen my sons for the first time to stay over, realizing I couldn't accept it anymore. It was my first year of my PhD. It was going absolutely horrifically. So I tried to kill myself, because that was the only option I had left. So I won't say how, because that's an important thing. I tried to kill myself, and I planned for it. I was so much happier because I knew I didn't have to deal with this anymore. It took a couple of weeks to plan for it. I packed up my flat. I gave stuff away to charity. Christ, I gave in my notice to my landlord that I was done. I survived that attempt and went into crisis recovery. And there's all that stuff that came with it. And then a couple of months later, I tried again. And again, I survived and built myself back up. And so that really shifted the paradigm of what I wanted to do. I'd always wanted to be a teacher. I love teaching. I love talking, obviously. I'd always wanted to be a teacher. But it wasn't on the cards. Because they won't let me be a teacher because I don't have GCSE maths. It's quite funny when you get a letter from a university saying, "Dear Dr. Walker, we're sorry you're not eligible for our teaching course because you don't have GCSE maths." That's quite funny. You don't have the right skill requirement. Like, really? Okay.
It's like you're a doctorate,
yeah,
because you think 2 + 2 = potato, you can't get a teacher degree. It's essentially what it is.
Believe it or not, even having a humanities/science degree, they still teach you to count. So it's amazing.
Yeah. It's like my 7-year-olds know how to fucking count. They know maths better than I do, and they're 7.
Proper computer said no situation, innit?
Yeah. Well, I think what I'll do is because I think my kids, well, as long as they stick down the right path, they'll do well in maths. So I will they're identical twins. No one's going to know. I'll give you one of their maths, what qualifications. And that's you're set.
Honestly, I realized very quickly I can't stand kids. So I'm actually quite happy. I'm not sure I would be a good school teacher. I have worked in schools and taught in schools subsequently.
Yeah, just for clarification, you wouldn't meet the kids. You just steal their work.
Yeah, right. I'm all meant having to do the job afterwards. I've got 2 of my own. I'm trustable. Anyway,
yeah.
So the second year of my PhD, I realized that I realized how close I'd come. That was the third time in 15 years I'd attempted suicide. Something.
Yeah.
And if you're an academic, one of the ways that we tend to cope with things is we learn about it. So I read everything like separate to my PhD, and it just became part of my PhD. So half of my PhD was in medical military history, which is what my first book was on, but the other half was on suicide. So that's how, when I came out my PhD, I started doing suicide research, and then 4.5 years ago, I ended up working at the University of Glasgow and in occupational health, and I just brought my suicide stuff with me, and I've just been bang, 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 hammering it ever since. So that is a very long answer to your original question. What is a suicidologist? I'm a suicidologist. I'm a specialist in suicide prevention and research. I helped write the guidelines for NHS England on suicide prevention. I've written articles on suicide in journals. I wrote for Time magazine on suicide in the military. I've given advice to all of the governments in the UK on suicide prevention and suicide problems, and I continue to create research projects, and I now design AI programs to work with suicidality and risk projection.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, we'll talk about the actual projects that you've done. If obviously you're allowed to talk them, I don't know what you're allowed to say and not say.
No, you're grand. You're grand. I'm sure your 7 watchers won't tell anyone.
Yeah. Well, we never know. We might get 10. So tell me a little bit about like kind of some of the the papers that you've published and the research that you've done.
Cool. Yeah. So as I said, writing for Time magazine, never thought I'd get to do that. That was awesome. And I wrote an article, on the fact that in America, this was back in 2019, you had veterans shooting themselves in the car park of veteran associations, right? And the statistic was 1 a day.
Wow.
So 1 a day was taking their own life in a car park. Now, that sounds horrific, and it is. Don't get me wrong, but as a statistical anomaly, it doesn't even come anywhere near, because America's so vast. There's so many people in the armed services that it's not a big number as you would think. But you can't use statistics when you talk about suicide, because a suicide is a life. Suicide is one of those weird things. We all have an opinion on it, right? In the same way, like assisted dying and so on and so forth. So we can look at it in different ways, and it can be difficult to fit in your head. So one of the ways that I sometimes compare it to is school shootings, because anyone who's a parent, anyone who, quite frankly, is a human being, immediately pulls back from the word school shooting. Christ, we had 1 in the UK, and it has set the precedent for all of our gun laws ever since, right?
Yeah.
America is having 1 a week, 1 every 4 days at this point. It's horrific. But my argument here is the same with school shooting and suicide, is that if you look at the amount of young people who are being killed in school shootings, it's not statistically relevant, because so many other young people die in America on the streets. Gang-related wars. If you happen to be a person of color and you're anywhere near a police officer, stuff like that, then the numbers aren't that high. But any single death of a child in a school shooting is a tragedy, in the same way that any single death as a result of a suicide is a tragedy. And these are tragedies. And so even though it's not statistically significant, it's still a big thing. And the American military aren't doing enough to help their veterans. A lot of them end up homeless. They end up with drug problems and so on and so forth. PTSD is a huge problem, particularly after Vietnam, Gulf War, and the war on terror and all that kind of stuff. The war for freedom. So I wrote that for Time magazine, and I wrote a similar piece on the British military here in the UK that was in the Independent, and the argument was the same. We have a huge issue with military suicide and veteran suicide, but it was determined at the time that the numbers weren't high enough to really make a focus of it. I'm glad to say that about 7 years later, I've contributed to a number of talks, and I've worked with some amazing people who have finally forced the governments to recognize that military suicide is a huge problem, and it's led to some fantastic initiatives. And I've been part of that, and that's really great. So I've moved away from military suicide, although if my publisher for my second book is watching this, I am still writing that book. I will finish it. I am really sorry. I'm supposed to be writing a century of military suicide, and to be honest, the MOD got in the way because they refused to give me data from 1990 onwards because they said it wasn't part of public interest.
Right. Well, deliberately
Yeah.
divert your publicist to this episode so they can see this bit, and there you go. You've got your locked in excuse ready.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't excuse the rest of the book that I haven't written. Anyway, it's been written. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. You're not my real mom. Anyway, but so my current project is on nurses, because nurses are 4 times more likely than any other female-dominated profession to undertake a suicidal action, and there are real problems with nurses across the world. We know there are issues about money. We've also had the union problems. The union, they've been on strike. They've had the union stuff during the pandemic. Nurses were at the very forefront. They were in the trenches, as it were. Student nurses who'd only been on courses 6 months were suddenly put on wards, which had a huge impact on their mental health. Like my own niece was training to be a nurse at the time, and the stress that she went through during COVID actually meant she left the course, which was really sad. And she definitely wasn't the only one. Yeah. Nurses are constantly put under pressure. They're always the whipping dog, or however you want to say it, for anything that goes wrong. And I feel that the field is dominated by discussions about doctors, or the general term of medics. And don't get me wrong, Andrew, like, doctors are undertaking suicide. This is a huge problem. But I think blending doctors and nurses into the same equation just isn't fair. Doctors have responsibilities and concerns and fears and stresses that are unique to them, and they need that attention. But there are people doing that already, but there isn't the same for nurses. And very few studies have been done. There was one in Manchester that did a study on nurses and showed just the high level of stress and likelihood to suicidality. There was one done in America, and that's a really general statement, which said the same thing. There's a chap in Ireland who's doing a PhD on nurses, and he's amazing. And a big shout out to Kieran, because Kieran, if I'm going to send this to you, because I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I'm super supportive of you, and I can't wait to keep working with you. And like individual groups, the Royal College of Nurses, the Queen's Nursing Institute, and their Scottish equivalents are all doing bits and pieces, but there just isn't this singular focus that says, how can we intervene? How can we recognize? And how can we intervene? And that's what my work is trying to do.
As we are starting to come up in time, we'll now end it with the two things that I normally do. No, it's just we have a time. That is it.
Yeah.
If people would fund me to actually pay for a proper Zoom, we had unlimited time, we'd talk more. Sadly, life's a bitch.
Yeah. Like and subscribe. Although, if I had known in advance that you were limited by Zoom, I would have logged it in the other way around and sent you the recording, because academia. Anyway, sorry.
Not a problem. So, obviously, for your own kind of stuff, because as you touched on earlier, we met through stand-up comedy, so there's a lot of different hats that you have. Literally, one is on your fan right now. So, for anybody that is watching it, tell them where you can find you, for socials that are allowed to find you.
Well, okay. So, if you want me professionally, Google Dr. Simon Harold Walker. You can get through my website. I occupy about 3 or 4 pages on Google now, which is not doing great for my ego. But as a comedian, I love doing comedy, and I have to say, I love doing comedy with you. Some of my best gigs have been when I've shared a stage with you. You're a brilliant comedian and a great friend, and so it's an honor to talk comedy with you as well and share that stage. You can find me as Buckaroo BonSi, with the stupidest name and the best hat in Scottish comedy. And again, you can get me on my website. I've got a website, Buckaroo BonSi. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter, because screw Twitter, but Blue Sky and TikTok. TikTok's the best way. And I usually wear a cowboy hat. And this isn't the one I wear because it's too small.
So, yeah, I genuinely did think you'd shrunk it in the dryer.
I know, right? No, it's just a stupid hat. But so yeah, and I love doing comedy, and it's my way, because my work can be quite dark.
Mm,
it's quite wonderful to be able to get up and make jokes.
yeah.
So I love doing it.
And the final question that I'll ask you is to ask all my guests is if you could give one piece of advice to anybody struggling with mental health issues at this point in time, what would that piece of advice be and why?
Talk to me, and if not me, talk to someone else. The biggest killer in mental health is feeling that you're alone, and you're not. There is always someone who wants to hear it. And if you cannot find anyone else at all, then find me. You can find me on all those social media platforms. You can find me on online. You send me an email, you send me a message, you get me on Facebook. I don't care how, but I want to listen because I felt like you have felt right now. Not you, Andrew, but the
No,
person who's struggling.
yeah.
It's the best advice I can give to anyone because silence kills, and you don't have to be silent because there are people out there who care.
The reason we gravitate to each other so much is because we've been through similar ringers. Well, I've been upfront what about why this channel stopped. At first, it was because the views weren't there, and rightly so. That does play a part. You don't want to let people down. Well, if they don't get the attention you feel they deserve. But the main reason I did give up was because I tried to take my life for the seventh time. I lost my kids. I lost Alison. I lost everything. I was in the same state, homeless. Genuinely thought I can't get through another day, and I had to focus on that and recover. And thankfully, when I'm now at a stage where I can get back to talking about it again and raising awareness of what I need to do. And it's why we gravitated to each other because like-minded people who have been through similar situations know the road, but they also know where the road stops and they know
Yeah,
how you can get there. I always equate it to like because I'm a big steam train fan. Well, I always
yeah,
equate it to like you're being on like you're on a train. Like people that I come into contact with, they'll hop on a stop and then they'll get off at the next stop once they're better. But guys like us, we
yeah,
sadly drive that train 24/7. But it's so we can
yeah.
help others make sure they don't drive trains of their own.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really good point, man. And I think it's worth noting that yeah, it people like us do tend to be the ones who listen to other people, but there's an internalization thing that always worries me about. We try to help others because we also want help ourselves, and it's
Yeah.
important to self care.
Hmm.
And I've said that to you before, and I'll keep saying it to you as well that there has to be that fine line between caring for others and caring for yourself because you are super important. You, Andrew, you're super important. You're super important to your friends, to your family, to your kids. That's worth preserving. And I think it's amazing that you do these things and reach out to others. And I'm really proud of you for that. But you have to take care of yourself first as well. And it's a balancing act. And God, I haven't got it right. So if one of us gets it right, you let me know how to do it. But
Yeah. Well, when I figure it out or I find that AI cheat code, I'll let you know.
what is it? The Konami cheat code: up, down, left, right, whatever.
Yeah. I try. I equate it to like the Sonic 3 cheat code from Mega Drive. No matter how many times I did that code, I could never hear that ring sound when I got supersonic, and it fucking bothered me for years.
Did you ever probably shouldn't say this on your video, you might want to cut this, but did you ever in Lara Croft in Tomb Raider 3 attempt to type out wannabe by the Spice Girls to see if her clothes would come off?
I never knew that was a thing, but I know plenty of like gamers, and I will ask them that question.
You're gonna have to ask that because I this popped into my head recently and I was like, what? It must be one of those urban legends. Like, and
Mm,
I could Google it, but it's much more fun. I think we've lost with the internet the pub question where you'd be like, "Oh, does anybody remember?" And
hmm.
everyone would go, "No."
Yes.
And we've lost that. I think because I love shit like that. I might
Yeah.
start asking that on stage. Does anyone remember trying to get Lara Croft's clothes off? And why? What were we gonna do with those rectangular breasts? Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
like
it's
let's
like when we
yeah.
go into like eventually find a girlfriend of our own and realize that's not how they actually looked.
It's like, what do you mean I can't balance my dinner on it? Like,
Yeah. It's like I wanted that chicken tikka masala ready meal, damn it.
I just now the idea of Lara Croft trying to breastfeed and like cutting the bear's mouth. Like honestly, we were just so hard up for it. Kids today, you don't understand what the internet has done for you,
Yeah.
right?
Well, in fairness, VPNs are trying to make it harder for them.
Well, somebody did point out to me recently that the biggest protection that we had for pornography when we were when we were kids was a high shelf, and
Mm,
we had to go and find it in the bushes.
yeah, but even then, the bushes had jagged nails. That the
Yeah, but it was
struggle,
such a weird. Who was sticking porn in bushes? I've never understood this.
the
Very weird.
elders that had been through what we'd went through and wanted to help the next generation, but we wanted the same scars as they did.
Brilliant,
And
brilliant.
I
Well,
think that's a,
there we go.
I think that's a brilliant note to end it on. So, Si, thank you
All
so
right.
much for coming on, and being like the initial guest back for hopefully make some more episodes in the future.
Genuine pleasure. You take care, man. Thanks again.
And I'll do it. Until next time, everybody, I've been Andrew Durnan. This has been Dr. Si Walker. Check him out in his socials. And until next time, take care. Stay safe. Bye bye.